Words get silenced, facts under attack. Healthcare's broken, truth don't get no slack. People scroll past while the planet cracks. Time to stand up, no more looking back. It's dirty, it's raw, but we'll call it out. We've had it.
Welcome to the Shit Show. It's Andrea Edwards.
There you go. Sorry about that. Welcome to the show, and I'm Dr. David Coe.
I'm Richard Basalato, and today you find me in Stockholm, physically speaking, and on this show in the bottom left.
And my name is Joe Augustin. Welcome to the show that has been living up to its name, unfortunately, or the world seems to be rising up to live up to our name. I don't know how that works, but it's a special kind of week when the only thing capable of distracting us from the literal threat of global escalation is a Louis Theroux documentary about the Manosphere. Finally, a chance for everyone on the internet to weigh in on gender dynamics while the actual planet prepares to evict us. It's like arguing about the seating arrangement on the Titanic, except the iceberg's made of AI-generated deepfakes, and it's made and created on $200 a barrel oil. So that's kind of where we are today.
Yeah. How are you guys been sort of feeling this week? I mean, just to sort of set some context, I keep an eye on everything that's going on as much as I can, but I haven't been able to keep up for a long time. But now it's a different level of intensity than it's been before, and it's frustrating because I like to keep up. How are you guys sort of feeling about it?
Very hard. Many moving parts, and you try to kind of prioritize, which inevitably means you're missing out on some bits and pieces here and there. But it's a very, very complex and fast-moving world, and hard, I think, for anyone to actually stay on top of what's going on. So you try to focus on the things you think matters the most, but it might not be right. Who knows? Yeah.
And that's obviously what we're trying to do here, is sort of break it all down and pull it together so that people who don't pay as much attention as we do, but who are probably sitting in the despair category right now, so we can help them sort of get a little bit more sort of, that sort of bigger perspective, because it's important. Joe and David?
Well, I feel kind of differently from you guys, because I think you guys stay so much in touch with everything that you're really entrenched in it, and so you can get all the feelings of it that go along with it, right? I think of myself as someone who's more like the average man. I go out there, try and get the feel of what's going on. I'll meet one or two people, just get a sense of their perspective on things. And I think for most, and this is again based on a small sample size, for most people that I've met, it is not quite the kind of dire story that's going on right now. It's a story right now how the war is bad and the price of fuel's gone up and the price of petrol's gone up. It isn't the complex poly crisis that we've been talking about. It really isn't all about that. No one has talked to me and mentioned anything about the food logistics and the food, how it's all in real trouble right now. No one has the sense of that at all. So I was thinking about it. It's how it would sound to the outside world if we speak the way we did just now. It really would have alienated quite a lot of people, because they would go like, "I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on." I want to assure you that if you've accidentally happened upon this, and I know I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there is a terrible, terrible thing that's happening right now, and you need to have a little bit more of a sense of it, because it is. Unfortunately, not just, it's one of those things where the fuse has been lit on a bomb. We have some time to try and figure out what to do, but the fuse has been lit.
That's a very good analogy.
Yeah, and the choice to not pay attention, because I've been speaking to people too, and they admit to being happily in a state of denial. But at the same time, they'll tell me how their flights were redirected around the Middle East, and they're telling me the impacts of the situation on them personally while still being in a state of denial. So as time goes on, and when you listen to the economists and David and Richard, I'm very interested to hear what you've got to say, like the impacts that we are all going to individually experience. The word catastrophic is regularly used, and it doesn't sound like there's any way that we're not going to experience it.
No, I think there is a certain inevitability about the path we're traveling on.
Yeah.
And then you can discuss, the flower arrangements on each side, but I think the path leads one way.
Yeah. No matter what, right?
No matter what. Yeah.
I think, I think from here, right? So I go out, everything's perfect. I'm in London. Generally, people just need to get on with their lives, go to their jobs and stuff. I had a disruption in that. I was going to see my mum. I read my book with her, Sparking Nature's Pace. Quick plug there. New approach to climate change. It's on YouTube as a playlist on my channel, Rethinking Choices. So have a look at that. And then I got to Victoria Station. It said, due to reported emergency with everybody, please leave the station. The station is now closed. Now, if someone falls on a line, what happens? That line gets closed, generally. And there's a delay on that line. People are moved away and they're told to go along and think about what they're going to do. If there's a scuffle or fight or whatever goes on, then that generally gets limited down and the rest carries on, because London's transport is something that has to keep going along this way, and it's gotten very good at dealing those things. So the previous time when I had something like that, experienced something like that, was back in the 80s, 90s, when the IRA bombing was going on in London, where you close the whole station, get everybody out in that way. It starts going out, realizing people who look like they were moving from Victoria railway station as well, what the tube would feed into. So it's obviously not just the tube in that way. Those kind of disruptions are going to keep increasing, and it's very easy. You don't actually have to have a bomb for you to report a bomb. You actually have to be there for someone to report it and think something is left behind. And that's the sort of situation disruptions. Along the way, on my way then to Mum, I then took the rest of the journey walking. I met this woman coming along and asking the way to Victoria. And I was saying, oh, is it? And she's meeting a friend there. And she'd just been kicked out from a station before that was leading to it. So they got closed and everybody got kicked out there. The result of that. And those are the sort of things that I think will increase into people's lives, and it would affect them in that way. The way that Richard and I sees is kind of like from another perspective of how the goods on the shelves may not be there, the prices of the goods on the shelves may not be there, but in terms of their ability to get to work, to get to meet someone they need to meet for their work in their everyday lives, there are going to be a lot more of those interruptions around. That's kind of what I think of as a inevitable consequence, and I'm beginning to feel it. And what that does is people get more on edge. You kind of notice people are just more on edge. It really isn't like, oh, there's nothing going on. And people are aware that somehow there's this sort of great conflict going on, this war going on. And the difficulty is they look at governments from the perspective of what they think governments should be doing in order to make our lives better, and can't comprehend or fail to have this connection back, and this goes to Joe's kind of disconnect in that way, that actually governments are run by megalomaniacs who are intentional in causing harm to others in order to profit for themselves. Now, that sounds like a crazy thing to say, but you look around at the governments around in the world today, and you see which one fits you better, and then that's going to better inform you about the view you want.
Yeah. All right. So, look, let's get stuck into the news. So I'll start with some of the items that we're not going to discuss, and if obviously when I get through this list, you can jump in with any thoughts. But we saw overnight, before I sent this to you, that the Prime Minister of Japan was insulted by the great diplomat, otherwise known as Donald Trump, who said that who knows better about surprise than Japan, referring to the attack on Pearl Harbor during World War II. And incidentally, the reason for the attack on Pearl Harbor during World War II is very similar to the situation Japan now finds itself in from an energy perspective. So very interesting. 26 million people are facing extreme hunger in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Somalia. And one of the other impacts of this war is that Qatar stood in and replaced USAID with a lot of funding. That funding has now been cut off again. So for people in this region, they're basically starving, and the local governments, there's just too many to help. There's a terrible situation going on in Cuba. We saw that its electrical grid collapsed. Russia has apparently been delivering some oil, even with the embargoes by the US, and China's moving in with its solar panels. People are talking about this as a war crime by the US. There's a meningitis outbreak in the UK in Kent, where a lot of my British family actually live, and they don't understand what's going on because meningitis doesn't usually spread this way. So that's a story to keep an eye on. Here's something the MAGAs can celebrate. Donald Trump and the Republican Party are dismantling American democracy at a record-breaking pace, with the scale and speed of autocratization unprecedented in modern times. Basically, in just over a year, Donald Trump's presidency has reduced democracy back to the state of it in the US as same as 1965. The most famous tech bro, or the leader of the nerd Reich, Peter Thiel, is continuing his Antichrist speaking tour, and this time he's in the eternal city of Rome, which is obviously delighting the Pope and not. And finally, we have to ask ourselves, is it all worth it? Which is one of my boys' songs. I should have put it in as the theme tune today. But, the World's Happiness Report is out, and the English-speaking world is a clear exception. For the second year running, no country in the Anglosphere made the top 10. So there's a title in The Economists called "The Anglosphere is Increasingly Miserable," and that's reflected in a lot of other stuff. Just people are becoming nastier, meaner, unhappier, and they're sort of projecting that. So that's the stuff we're not going to talk about. Any comments on any of it?
Well, being in Scandinavia, as they published a report yesterday, it got a little bit of a spotlight on the news. And obviously the Finns won for like the 9th year running or something like that. They are the happiest people. And they had this comedian, television personality who they interviewed on the street of Helsinki. But he said something which is absolutely true, you know, within this kind of more light-hearted speech. And he said, you have to understand why the Finns are so happy, he says. It's basically a formula, he said. Happiness is expectations minus outcome.
So I'd like to throw in a little bit about the Kent thing and the aspect there. And it's just that meningitis B is bacterial and is widely has a great climate variability association with it. And there's data for about a decade now that climate change is taking out the usual kind of really dead season for this thing in sub-Saharan Africa. So it's really spreading as a result of climate change in that way.
Meningitis.
And of course, people travel.
Yeah.
Meningitis B. So
Okay.
as a result, people travel more. And so that increases the chance of it spreading around. So you have a confluence of multiple factors, and meningitis B is not the one that's usually vaccinated against in the UK. So what you have is a convolution of factors, and underlying all of those factors is a climate variability, which is the case with many of the things that you'll find. You're going to see all sorts of reasons, but underlying it is a climate variability that nobody's going to talk about, but that's the trigger that pushes things along.
Interesting. All right, so we're going to start with the war. So David can't stay with us for the whole show today because he's got to go to an appointment. But I put a few things there: attacks on energy infrastructure and the escalation that we're seeing, the death of Ali Lajiani, the US fracturing with the resignation of Joe Kent, who looks like he's a super MAGA guy. The US-China meeting delayed. Who wants to kick off with what they're seeing with the war? And I'll highlight you.
I'm always happy to go first. You know that.
Okay. Cool.
I think the killing of Larijani is very significant because in many ways he was the true leadership for a large part of the administration in Iran. If you like it, the dark eminence that actually ran things there. So it is significant, very, very significant. And given the amount of losses the leadership in Iran has sustained, I think from here it's much, much more difficult to try to figure out which direction sort of doesn't necessarily mean they can implement it, but what the leadership wants to do from here is going to be much, much more difficult to gauge for outsiders, because now you're dealing with a lot of relatively unknown individuals in very senior positions. My take on the whole conflict is, we have a huge competition to our own shit show because there are no good end games from here. I think largely speaking, and it doesn't come across very much in the mainstream media, is that Iran has got it exactly where they want it now. The question is whether they can, in this position, lift it to the level they would want to lift it to, which is basically a wholesale Islamic uprising against the infidels. And with the infidels, I would basically include the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia in that. Because this is their moment in time to do so. And they have got it to the point where you fracture the West. It's basically US plus Israel because no one else has an interest. They all of a sudden are looking at a lot more backing from Russia if energy prices stays here. This is just a massive boom for Putin. And if you're in Ukraine now, it's pretty bleak because this is money into Russian coffers. So are they in a position where they can capitalize on the position that they've actually tried to engineer for more than a quarter of a century? Or are they so weakened because it's pretty clear that militarily they don't have a chance against Israel and US, that they can't inflict any significant damage, and they can't show to the followers in their uprising that they're a horse worth betting on? That's kind of out there. But my overall top-down sense is that the Iranians are pretty happy to where they've taken this conflict now. This is going to be a lot of damage to the West.
Well, I don't know if I feel exactly the same, because I think where they are is at the moment they are likely to be somewhat more cornered than Richard may describe, and that kind of says that they've also discovered the card that they need to play, which is what Kuwait did or Iraq did with the Kuwait invasion back in, when was that, 91 or whatever?
1990, right?
1990, which is they destroyed the oil facilities as they were leaving. And that's the thing in this case. They know that their card that they got to play is to destroy all of the oil and gas production facilities around the Middle East. They know they have a finite time to do this. So it's a case of whether they actually find a way out of it without doing it, or they're going to do it because they have no choice, or they will feel they have no choice but to do it. Because if we wait longer on this, they're going to find that they themselves are up against the time in a way. They've got however many weapons or whatever it is, there's a finite number. So, kind of a few bombs a day eventually becomes very few. You need enough of it to get through everything to try and do that. They also have the thing about the Strait of Hormuz, and there's also another strait, Bab al-Mandab, which is over the other side of the Red Sea. It's equally narrow. It's basically controlled by the Houthis over there. It's over Yemen in that way. So those two together is going to be, the other one goes into the Suez Canal, so it goes into kind of a whole trade, as well as the flow of oil at the moment, which has now gone east to west to go off that side of the Saudi Arabia to try and make their way through to the rest of the world. So, and again, those things, they're not going to stay there forever.
What percentage of the world? So they're saying 25% just with this war. What percentage would that add to the mix of the world's oil and gas supplies, as well as everything else? Of course?
Saudi probably. I mean, you know, the Gulf states in terms of oil and gas probably, I don't know, about quarter. Richard knows better.
Yeah,
about quarter
I would
of
say,
total.
Yeah, if you include all the Gulf states, Iran and Iraq, they produce about 25 million barrels.
Yeah, and they come from either side of this Saudi Arabia, be it, peninsula, Saudi Arabian peninsula. So two waterways going out of there is how they get out. So you deal with that, and if you try to get everything through the Suez Canal in the sense of the north of it coming down into it, Suez Canal is very limited in that way. And then you've got the rest of world trade. But what is the situation is that this is not like the Cold War where both sides can sit there forever. There is a time, there is a slow drag that is going to drag on Iran as this carries on in this way.
Yeah. So one of the Ali Larijani, is that how you say his name? He's killing as well as every other senior leader. One of the risks is, of course, there's no one to negotiate with. So when they all become completely sporadic and they're spread out around the country, that's the big problem. And I was asking about the percentage if the Houthis succeed in shutting. So it's currently 20%, 25% just with the Hamas. So if we add the other side onto it, it would have to be higher than a quarter, right? But
well,
the other,
I think negotiation is not going to work. I mean, the part of the thing, part of kind of the take. I was speaking to some people very very involved in the Middle East about the October 7th event, and they said, it's because Israel and Saudi were going to sign the Abraham Accord, and if they did that, then essentially that takes all the support out of the Palestinians from the Arab states in that way. So the Palestinians, or the more militant part of them, need to act in that way. And if you think about the days before what happened here with the bombing in Iran, the Americans and the Iranians were going to sign, were reporting they were getting forward in the negotiations. And if you go back over what happened with sort of previous negotiations in this Trump era, is every time they get somewhere, something else happens to disrupt it. So if I'm an Iranian, and if I feel I have a choice other than complete surrender in that way, negotiation is not a path, because I can't negotiate with someone. And just think about Trump in Japan. His comment about Pearl Harbor is, well, we can't trust you because you tell people we want the surprise in that way, apart from the fact that it's kind of a bit of a touching of a raw wound in that way. How do you negotiate with someone like that? How do you negotiate with someone where the negotiating partner they send along is a property mogul and a son-in-law? I mean, how do you imagine you're going to negotiate something with those people in that way?
I suppose, David, what I was more talking about is an end to the violence, right? So everyone's calling for an end to it, but there'd be no one to negotiate with. But
what I'm saying is
two different things.
This idea where you think the governments are there for you, that they act in your best interest. They don't. They act in the self-interest of whoever is leading those governments.
Yeah.
So when you talk in that way, you're saying, they act in your best interest. I don't think they do. Right.
Okay. I think we're saying two different things, but another thing that's coming up is whether or not the US will attempt to go in to retrieve Iran's nuclear fuel. So that's just like a crazy conversation, because first of all, they have no idea where it is. There's 3 possible bases under mountains, and the whole boots on the ground conversation. So Iran has been experiencing extreme heat for a number of years now, and by the time they get this moving, they could already be in that territory. So they don't know where it is. They could be there for longer. And then, of course, you've got the whole Israel aspect to it. And, in the last 24 hours, basically Trump said that they didn't approve of Israel doing what they did by taking out that the what was it called?
Pars gas field.
Yeah. So they didn't approve of that. And initially Israel said, no, that's not true. And then Netanyahu said it was true. So there seems to be a little bit of a potential fracturing between the two bros at the top, which doesn't give you any sort of reassurance.
No, I think Israel and US wants very different outcomes here, or at least they have very, very different intentions about what the desired outcome is. And that's going to become more apparent as we move forward, that they're not totally aligned. And the fact that they kind of openly can't agree on what constitutes success and what the end point kind of looks like, I think is playing into Iranian hands. And for me, this is Iran's moment in time. If this fails, and I mean, basically you have, what was it? He tried to plagiarize Trump, you have unconditional surrender, right?
Yeah.
If that's the outcome, then it's the end of Iran. Iran will become a very small regional power without any hope of ever challenging the Saudi supremacy in the region. But this is their moment in time to become the dominant power in the Gulf, if they succeed with a more widespread uprising against the current status quo.
Yeah, but so okay, so let's I just want to widen this a bit, Richard, right? So yes, obviously that potentially could be, the outcome if Israel succeeds. But there's a story. So we have access to so little information in this war. The public satellites that sell the data aren't releasing it till 2 weeks after. So we don't actually, the media can't keep on top of what's going on. So we don't know. Israel's not allowing people to show things. Right across the Middle East, they're not allowed to show things. So it's a very challenging war to keep an eye on. And America, unusually, loves to put all its wars on TV. They're not showing everything that's going on, which of course could be linked to the fact that they know that they're losing. Oh God, I've just forgotten what I was going to say. In Bahrain, there's a minority that rules the majority. So one of the potentials is for that to flip. Mm-hmm. And then the Saudi UAE fracture, which has been going along in the background and not getting a lot of attention for a very long time, that could potentially come up and rupture as well. So we could be seeing, David, you're nodding your head. Do you want to jump in? I think there's other things going on in this mix that
absolutely. I think yeah. This is exposing a lot of stuff, and what I want to bring forward in some ways is how it affects us, basically.
Yeah, but that's the next point.
Well, actually, I think that's where the pressure is going to come from. Because the pressure in the US is going to come from people's lives that are not in the Middle East. That's where it's going to come from. So we talk about the energy prices, and I saw for the first time a comment, which I think I raised between us before, about helium. Helium, this very light gas, you usually see it as making funny noises when you have a balloon party and those other things. But it's essential for a number of things. Essential for your MRI machines or MRI machines for your nuclear scans and those sort of things that you have. Because they need to be cooled to very low temperatures for them to be stable to work in that way. They're also essential in the production of semiconductor chips because they are the very light, very, very easy to flow, and they basically function like water when you wash things, but when you want things to be really, really, really clean to kind of an atom scale in that way, it's helium that you use. And helium is produced together by geological accidents with natural gas. And they're produced due to the decay of radioactive atoms that are all over the world, but just kind of tiny little, lightly, very low concentration. And they all get collected around in the same sort of reservoirs. So when the gas field gets attacked, it's the helium that's also being lost in that way.
Mm.
And as with everything else in the world, we use everything that we produce, and so there's no buffer for very much of anything in that way. So we're going to start feeling that's going to flow into the the onboarding of new people, or the use of AI, or whatever it is, because all those things need a bit of silicon chip around in it, and kind of everything that you can imagine, including your electronic vape that you go along and smoke, is going to be affected in there. And it's going to be a few months down the line. So the more that gets hit, the broader that impact goes. And when we look about the consequence and the fractures, it's not just the fractures of the Gulf states, it's the fractures of the politics within kind of our own, nicely developed Western world, and all the rest of it, or China, or Japan, or wherever you want to pick, or Australia, in that way. Everywhere, the politics is kind of very much on edge. It's just going to make those things much more on edge, and this is going to be this war going on to the next part. So from Iran's side, selling that story along the way, as Richard is sort of saying, but this real tool is this widespread economic consequence. And that's the part that the Americans is going to not want to feel. They would want to go along and push the actions faster and sooner. So this is going to come to a head, because it's all sitting there. And the longer it is, the greater the fractures will be. That will work to some extent for the Iranians. It will not work so well for the Americans. So they will want to hold off, but they can't hold off for a long time, because, as you say, they're still under this sort of climatic problems underlying it all. That will cause them ultimately to have to take some sort of action.
Yeah. All right, Joe, do you want to jump in? Let's put him on the spot.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the situation that the world's been put into because of some of these decisions that have been made. Like one of the things that really got me was this attack that there was an attack on Iranian desalination plants, which seems like not a really it doesn't seem to have that much of a significance until you kind of do some analysis on it and go like, okay, why would you do something as stupid as that? So in war, there's this thing about reciprocity. If you do something to me, it opens up the reply, right? You take one of mine out, I can take one of yours out. It puts it on the board, right? And the Iranian desalination plant was attacked, and it didn't seem that asymmetrical to me until I got to know the numbers. And so there was a chart that came out about the reliance of the region on desalination plants. Israel, pretty high on that list. Qatar, even higher on that list. Everybody else was high on the list. Lowest on the list, with only 2% reliance, was Iran.
Yeah.
So it was a spectacularly stupid move by whoever called it in, as in like, we'll attack them where it hurts not, and basically leave, or sort of like, if the usual parlance of war is going to be if it's taken the way it usually goes. It opens up desalination plants as targets for everybody else when it means so much more to everybody else.
Yeah.
So that was one of the moves that really got me. It's just like it's strategically there is such poor gamesmanship being applied. There's such poor strategy being applied, and it's perhaps it's one of those things where you get the sense of how uninformed the Americans are to start with, right? Because I think, and this is just my guess, this is me being as kind as possible, to say that someone thought like, oh, a desalination plant, that sounds like critical infrastructure in the Middle East. And it's going to, without doing any additional research, without thinking about the next step that's going to happen after that, they thought, yeah, if we hit that, it's going to hurt them. And when the numbers came out, it was just ridiculous to me. It was like, I think Qatar's number, if I remember correctly, just off the top of my head, I think Qatar's number was in the high 70s. I think Israel's in the 20 plus or whatever it is. But
everyone's
for Iran,
in the 70, 80, 90, yeah.
it was
They're all
just
70,
between-
80, 90%, right? Apart
yeah,
from
it's huge.
Iran.
It's huge. And so when you do something like that and you say, now that's on the board, just even if you're playing hardball, even if you're being as macho as whatever it is, you're just picking the wrong thing, the wrong place to pick a fight. So yeah, and if, of course, not as strategic. I mean, I don't think that Iran was trying to get to any kind of spot like it is right now. But what I think America has done is it's given it the opportunity. Like I think I was thinking about it in terms of our own environment and our own lives, right? And there's always a gear that we never discover for ourselves that we have, right? Because we're never forced into it. We're never put in the position where we have to use that gear. And I think what America did was it put it on the table first of all, by being as devastating as it was and as being as overt as it was in its traditional military attack, that it forced Iran into a new gear that it probably wasn't going to run in before, right? And I think this may not have happened in just one step. I think it happened probably in two steps. I think the first bombing that happened way back when everything was obliterated, it caused the leadership in Iran, I think, to think, okay, we need to rethink how we do things, and therefore it prepared itself for what's happening right now, because based on all the bombing and all the destruction that's happening right now, the infrastructure to launch all these other attacks which are affecting other countries right now should have been disabled dramatically, but it has not. But so what it kind of indicates is that the infrastructure to launch all these attacks was distributed at some point, where they took it in the spaces and places where you couldn't find them, so they could use them. They can be dispersed out into different parts. And then remembering that Iran is a huge space.
I want to add. I mean, Israelis destroyed the Palestinians the desalination plant last year, in northern Gaza, and it cut off electricity supply to its other one in early this year. So this attacking of water is actually being done, and this aspect where Iran talks about, there will be no restraint.
Yeah.
For them, this is that last push that they're going to do. And what they've seen is, you attack our oil fields, we attack your gas. This is your economic life, but we're not attacking you as people living. So how far they go or whatever it is, the Middle East doesn't survive without desalination. These things take years to rebuild. Even when you have all the materials and things around with it. The other thing that's very easy to do is just the pollution from just kind of oil spills that you can get along the way. That will completely destroy kind of the life in the Gulf in there too. So that even if you were to go along through and you then try to rebuild your desalination, you're taking water from polluted water, and you've got a big mess coming along with that in there. So absolutely to Joe's comment, but the point I wanted to add is that this has already been done over the Palestinian region in Gaza. Not reported, nobody talked about it, but it's happened happened last year, happened again this year.
Yeah.
In that way, and the Iranians know this.
Mm-hmm. And it's a war crime. Yeah.
And so the question is, at what point do they feel that actually, either in the way that Richard describes, this is their opportunity for the greater influence, or this is their last shot.
All right, so David started talking about the global impacts, and I think it's important for us all to understand the impacts right across the board, just so that we can understand how it's going to impact us. But before I do, two pieces that I recommend everyone reads. One is Everyone But Trump Understands What He's Done. That's in the Atlantic. And earlier in the week, The Guardian, Simon Tisdall, who writes pretty good pieces, I think. Here's the news from Iran. Donald Trump is making America lose wars again. So that they'll be all like they're on my world news page. I'll feature them in the weekend reads, but have a look. But I wanted. So I sent the guys a sort of as much as a spreadsheet as possible of global impacts that are linked to my 8 categories of the polycrisis. But I want to just sort of talk about a few things that I've noticed this week. So on because I lived in Thailand, I'm obviously paying attention to Thailand, but it's a very gas dependent country. And when I lived there, all of my friends who own properties, I'm like, please, whatever you do, just get solar panels, get solar panels. And the reason I was telling them to get solar panels is because the temperature was going up every year, and the grid at some point will snap and break in an extreme heat event. They've modernized the electricity, but it's still above ground, so it's still a threat, right? So now we're going into this time, and the broadcasters on TV were taking their jackets off and encouraging people to use less air conditioning because their infrastructure is run by gas. Well, Thailand is about to move into, just like most of the other parts of the global south, their extreme heat season. It's already very, very hot. It's really, really hot here in Singapore. So one of the potential outcomes of that is obviously we could see an absolute massive escalation in heat stroke deaths. We may never know the numbers. The other thing that's happening is coal is being pulled in again to replace gas because that's easier to get access to. So I'm sure Gina Reinhardt is rubbing her hands together in Australia so they can ship more coal. But there was one story, the elephants that go to Ayutthaya, which is like a beautiful ancient city in Thailand, sort of just north of Bangkok. We were there a few years ago with the boys. They can't ship the elephants in trucks, so that they have to walk to work. So just a sort of a small sort of example of how it impacts. But who wants to talk about impacts? Because I think it's the dining room table, it's the operating room. I mean, the AI sector, the semiconductors, which are in everything. There's so many things. But how does it impact us? Who wants to sort of personalize this?
Okay, if I can be the dumb one in the room first and represent that part of us, right? And I say it facetiously because I think there are a lot of people actually in business who don't think about those things. There are a lot of people in business who are actually just riding the wave of business. They're not actually at the leading edge of it, creating the stuff. So they don't really understand what's going on. They're just facing the inconvenience of the higher prices in terms of logistics and maybe the price of their own fuel. Everyone seems to be just talking about that, the addition to prices because of all these other aspects. But the people on the leading edge, those are the people actually who are a minority because they're so far down the value chain. They're the ones who really recognize what's going on. The inability to get fuel in a very literal sense, in the sense that you can't get diesel for the machine that you need to run. The story that comes to mind right now is the Australian farmers who are at a very critical stage where it's about it's about getting the land ready. It's about doing all the things you need to do, where you need the diesel and you need the fertilizer, both of which are now in very, very sparse supply. Uncertainty is at its maximum, and you've got, on top of all that, you've got all these weather conditions as well. And they're on the very start of the value chain, at the leading edge of it. And it's just something that's going to happen to all of us eventually, but we just don't see it. We are not going to feel it. And even the wholesale in the middle, doesn't feel it quite yet. They just feel a little bit in terms of prices and stuff, but they don't see. They're not looking the 3 months or 5 months or 6 months down the road if this continues as it is right now, because it's off their radar. And I think for most of us, so if you think about that, business is already a subset of the bigger community. The largest, and you can see how most of the world seems to be reacting to the war. They react in the only way that they get to see almost every day is that when they drive down the roads, they see a price on a petrol pump, and that reminds them that something else is happening and something in the world is going on. Because I felt I could put myself in that position because I was running an errand off to somewhere, and that's what I saw. There was nothing to suggest that anything had changed for us in Singapore, with the exception that if you were paying attention to fuel prices, you would see something going on there, and that's what the world seems to be looking at right now. So we are.
I'll give you an example from our home, right? So the protein impact. So the farmers in the US are going to grow less corn and more soy because corn needs fertilizer and soy doesn't. So what that means is the cost of corn is obviously going to go up incredibly high, and there will be an overabundance of soy. The corn is used to feed chickens and beef and farm animals. So the cost of all meats as well as eggs will increase dramatically because the cost to feed them is going to increase dramatically. So in our house, so my husband likes to have, he likes tin corn. I don't know why he does. I think it's a British thing.
Yeah, must be.
So my thought when I read stuff like that is, knowing that he likes his corn, put aside one cupboard and buy 52 cans of corn, so that for the next couple of years, there'll be, and I'm just putting a number out there, for the next couple of years, we'll have access to corn, because that's what he likes. So
you're the one that caused that gap in the red market.
But when the olive oil prices were going skyrocketing a few years ago because of drought, I went and bought 3 liters of. He's just saying tin corned rocks. I went out and bought 3 liters of olive oil, and I'm only just finishing it now, because I'm just paying attention to this stuff, right? So I'm like, well, there's going to be a shortage of that, and it's not necessarily a price increase as much as a shortage. And we're here in Asia, and I don't know what this impact of, because Asia is one of the most impacted markets in the world from what's happening right now from the oil and gas.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that's going to ripple out and impact us yet, right? So in Australia, they're asking people get on public transport so that there's enough fuel for the farmers to be able to run their engines, so that you can have food on the table. And yes, the food might be more expensive, but if you don't do it, you're not going to have any food on the table. So, it's an interesting sort of conversation.
I think we've been here before in the 1970s. We just forgot about it.
It's exactly the comparison, yeah.
Yeah, when there were days when you'd only travel on Wednesdays or whatever it is, and that's kind of how this can play out. What Joe points out very importantly, and this again where the climate comes in, because in the west of America, they're having incredible heat waves for this time of year, exceeding April records, and we're in March. In that way, so in Australia is having that intense heat, not only because there is a problem with agriculture because of the diesel and the fertilizers. The weather conditions themselves are not helping, and that's going to be the case. And this is in a year where we feel that El Nino is fading away at the moment, and we're going to get more hotter than usual because of El Nino coming, and this is not even at that point. In that part, so the part about Joe mentions about businesses focus on supply chain. They don't consider what happens when there's no supply. That's the difference. So all the business talks, all the business conferences is about how you broaden the supply chain, how you create multiple channels, multiple supply chains, but there is no point in having a chain when there is no supply.
No, I mean, what you're describing is more or less exactly how I view the really drop-down macro picture. We have lived ever since the 70s and the oil constraints in a world which was more or less perceived, and people got used to viewing the planet as an infinite pool of resources that we could draw on without any consideration of the future, right? So we're depleting aquifers, we're using lots of energy, etc. Now all of a sudden the planet at large is rebelling and is actually restricting us from using resources as freely as we would all like to do, because it's great to be having things on the cheap and virtually free. All these roads uniformly leads to a point where prices will go up. When you take away resources and supply, the only mechanism we know with how to solve this is higher prices, where you start rationing by wealth. That's the path we're traveling on. That's inescapable. And then politicians will try to make it fairer, or they will throw money around in trying to alleviate pressures on fuel for people and households who are really on the breadline. Ultimately, it won't work, because you cannot create further supply without increasing the cost, and someone will pick up, the tab for that cost, and it will be down the chain. And all these roads just lead to higher prices. And that's how we bankrupt ourselves. And that's how you get very dramatic societal change.
And that's the other big risk, right? The extreme right, the radical sort of approach, the strongman solving complex problems. And that's a bit of but even things like I've heard Savlon, Panadol, basic stuff like that, all made from petroleum. So at some point they're going to run out and their prices are going to go up. So there's a lot, and I've been putting together a list of what it is, but I'm just conscious of time. The economy. So Jerome Powell held a press conference this week and used the word uncertain 7 times. So we've talked about it before, and the idea that oil could hit $200 a barrel was considered absolutely off the table until this week. It's back on the table. It sounds like that's just an absolute catastrophe. But David, Richard, do you want to jump in and talk about what's going on here?
I think $200 would be unbearable for any level of the economy in what we would consider functioning state. I think you are already past the point where this will more or less lead to global recession, because you are effectively shutting down production of oil because there is no way to store it in the region. Prices will remain under pressure for quite some time, whether that is 90, 100, 120, doesn't actually matter that much where we settle in the medium term, because the shock has been delivered. And from here on, it's going to be very, very difficult for businesses and households to actually bridge this cost increase without serious implications for profitability. I think you cannot really underestimate how difficult the road ahead will be because of what's happened to energy prices. It filters through and permeates through the whole of society. And most of all, it has the detrimental effect of killing confidence. You have no confidence in what's going on, because if the US actually could have seen this picture and they still went ahead, you have zero confidence in the military leadership as well.
Well, I'd say they had too much confidence going in.
Possibly. That would explain a lot.
Well, I mean, it's a whole idea that it's the. I mean, when's the last time a land developer's ever oversold an idea, right? I mean, that's really the core of it. Someone says, "Okay, we'll just go in, we'll get it done," you'll move in by Wednesday. But that's the. I think that's what really typifies what's been going on here. It's overconfidence to the point where you're surrounded by an echo chamber of yes we can, and if you say no, let's swap you out, right? So it's a thing about possibilities. And as far as everything is concerned, I think the way things are turning out right now, it is definitely one of several outcomes that could have happened. It is not the most. I don't think it's the most desired one, right? I think it's a series of miscalculations kind of compounding on each other, and then right now there's this kind of backpedaling, right? So I mean, if you think about what Trump has done for himself right now, is first of all, he's trying to say to everybody that we don't need you, you're useless, you're terrible, and you're horrible, and you got terrible government and militaries and all the different things. He told all the other governments that, and that's just to make sure that everyone feels inferior to them. And then he wants to break apart the way the agreements are going. He's testing NATO to its limits. And then you find yourself in a situation right now where you just might need some friends. And he's if anything, he has right now the mist of it's not the mist, but it's the whole smoky air of burning bridges around him, right? He's done all that. And he's asking for the help of people to come in and be part of something which they didn't start and they wouldn't start. And it would be, stupid of them. And right now he's asking the countries who are in the area, the European countries, for instance, to get involved with the protection of ships, to essentially to join in the war, which strategically is just a crazy idea. America getting involved in that war from as far away as it is. I mean, America has always had the advantage of the span of oceans between them and everybody else. The Europeans don't have the same thing, and the expectation that any European country is going to say, "Yep, I'll do it," is just improbable. And so, what it actually reveals pretty much what Andrea was speaking of earlier. There's this lack of strategy. There's a lack of thinking about consequences. It's often been mentioned the idea of 4-dimensional chess. I would like to think it's more like primary 5 checkers being played by a president.
Yeah.
No, I think you're framing it beautifully, right?
I think
there is a complete lack of understanding what the end game will look like and what constitutes success here. It's actually on many, many levels no different from Vietnam or Afghanistan, because you haven't defined what success looks like. Regime change is an extremely nebulous term. It basically encompasses the whole span of no change to complete change. And I think that lack of understanding is working very much against the US here.
I think we're missing this part. A year and a half ago, Richard and I wrote this piece. It was really about global wealth and what should globally significant kind of wealth people they consider. And we had this term Curie because it's a unit of radioactivity, which is kind of how we feel about the world today. And the going from backwards, the E in there was European Union, the I was Iran. R is obviously Russia, and U is the US, but the C is China. And we've left China out of this whole conversation. And China is the key to whether all of this explodes off into kind of the terrible scenarios we're describing in that way, or whether it settles somewhere between kind of where we were and what that scenario is. We're never going to get back to where we were, but somewhere along the line, there is a spectrum along. The fact that Trump has delayed his trip to China, and the fact that Trump brought up the Pearl Harbor in his meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan, doesn't make it good as far as China, because as far as Trump's still concerned, China is still an enemy in that way. But China has that influence over Iran. It's been the main buyer and therefore the main supplier to Iran in terms of the money that it needs. It's been the main buyer of its oil. It had been the main buyer of the Venezuelan oil as well in that way. China's approach has always been very much of a case of saying, look, I leave the moralizing to the European Union. That's why the European Union is there, because we do need some major region having a moralizing voice. It's questionable whether it's doing that anymore, but that is important. But it always left that to the European Union, and it's always treaded the path of saying, look, our tradition is trade. We'll just get on with the trade. The best trade happens where I don't really care whether you're a good person or a bad person. As long as I can buy from you and trust you to deliver, we're happy. So that's a side that's really significant in here. China suffered hugely in that catastrophic scenario that we're describing. It would have incredible internal consequences in that way. So it has always been saying, its foreign minister has always been saying, look, we need some sensible approach to this, to how this goes out. Undoubtedly, it is using some of its influence behind the scene in different ways. But the delay of the meeting that Trump was going to have with Xi Jinping is not a good sign. That was meant for April, especially given that he was speaking with the Japanese Prime Minister just now, and then to go along and turn around and says, not talking to you for a bit, mate. So that, for me, tips it further towards, this is not going to be great. But we mustn't forget that. And it probably all depends on what's happening there.
But you know how things get, though, right? When you're renovating a ballroom, you just can't rely on the contractors to do what they're doing. So you have to kind of like come back and check things out yourself.
Yes.
Nice. But the Japanese insult is also interesting because Japan and China are obviously don't have a happy relationship at the moment. But I like right from the start, I just sort of visualized, Netanyahu in Trump's ear saying, no other president before you has had the guts to do this. You could be the one with the guts to do this. And the narcissistic sociopath went, yeah, I could be the one to do this with that. But I want to, if you don't mind, so this Atlantic piece, which I recommended everyone, but Trump understands what he's done. I wish I could do it, but I can't. I'd love to read it like a Dr. Seuss book. And Joe, if you can do that, I would appreciate it. But it goes, Donald Trump does not think strategically, nor does he think historically, geographically, or even rationally. He does not connect actions he takes on one day to events that occurs weeks later. He does not think about how his behavior in one place will change the behavior of other people in other places. He does not consider the wider implications of his decisions. He does not take responsibility when these decisions goes wrong. Instead, he acts on whim and impulse, and when he changes his mind, when he feels new whims and new impulses, he simply lies about whatever he said or did before. Now that's the first two paragraphs of an article in the Atlantic, right? But to me, like, when we were talking about the decisions to be and the yes men behind him, so when people talk about Trump derangement syndrome, I think people who support Trump have Trump derangement syndrome. I think the people who were saying this is a really, really, really bad idea, electing a person like him, we're fearing a moment like this because, like, even if everything stopped tomorrow, with the damage that's been done to the gas fields and the salination plants, we're not talking about everything will be back in normal within a couple of weeks. It's months and months, if not years or decades, before normality returns, based on what's happened so far, and the term whether or not it will go nuclear. That's been said far too many times for my level of comfort. And the China thing, there is not a single war game where the US has said, would we, if we went to war with China, would we win? They haven't won once. And one of the things that is happening, one of the implications that's happening from this war, is their war arsenal, especially the big rockets that take years to make, no matter what, no matter how many people are on the line. They're depleting their arsenal significantly, which is going to ultimately make China even more powerful because they're not using their rockets. So anyway, any thoughts on that?
No, I think what Atlantic says is kind of what we've been discussing. I've always been kind of perplexed over the sort of my lifespan, the lack of actually a complete strategic understanding of what's going on in the rest of the world when US acts on these things. European Union comes with a very, very different mindset, because you have a war on your doorstep. And the ultimate fear in Europe will always be a huge amount of refugees, because you collapse the order of, and that is kind of the starting point for how EU and Europe at large will engage here. And that's still their biggest fear. Of course, they don't like that the Iranians are clogging up, oil supplies, because it's affecting their electorate. But at least they seem to have so far kept the understanding that a full-scale involvement with the US here carries repercussions for themselves, particularly if the outcome is a massive refugee wave, which can happen anyway, regardless of outcomes. And Israel, on their part, is they have a different agenda. They actually, to me, looking far away and not actually having to be there physically, they are the only really rational actor here.
Israel.
Yeah. Israel perceives Iranian existence as a long-term national threat, and they have been wanting to hit them for a long time, and finally they found someone who could help them do so. But they're actually acting very rationally from an Israeli context.
So this is the thing about rationality and logic, right?
Yeah.
You're limited to a certain framework, and so within that framework, you're also great. So the Iranians are very logical as well, and in their whole response and everything is entirely consistent. And everyone else in their kind of perception is the same. It's like that comment a friend of mine used to say. In the first day of creation, God created people, or on the 7th, 8th day, or whatever it is. And then the next day he gave them more money, and everybody was annoyed and angry, and they looked at what the other person got and said, they don't deserve that. They don't deserve that. And the day after they gave them brains, and they all looked at theirs and thought, brilliant, I got the best. And that's the thing. We all think we've got the best logic.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there is proof that the people with the best brains are not the most confident, and the people with the least. And that's a good time for right now. Is there's a lot of philosophers and people who understand human behavior talking about, stupidity, why we have it, collective action, collective momentum. I'm sort of spending a lot of time with that. But Steve said to my Dr. Zeus thing. So would he be the twat in the hat? Now, I think twat means something rude somewhere, but I can't remember which country it is. But for me, it doesn't mean anything rude. So if you're offended saying that, my apologies.
Well, that's in the UK, but it's
the UK, right? Yeah, I knew one country.
And I use far stronger words than that.
I'm taking the liberty of taking Steve's inspiration to generate something very quickly, and because AI does this, would you like to hear it?
Sure.
Donald J. Trump, in a tall, shiny hat, did not think of this thing and did not think of that. He did not think forward. He did not think back. He did not think sideways or stay on one track. He did not think history mattered at all. He did not think maps were important or small. He did not think, if I push here today, what bumps might come bouncing along in my way. He'd tweet in the morning. He'd shout in the night. He'd change all his colors like fish in a fright. And when he'd switch sides, as he often just might, he'd say, the old color, it wasn't quite right. I never said that, said the twat in the hat. I never did this, I never did that. He'd huff and he'd puff and he'd point and he'd blame, as if fire had its own kind of flame. The analyst murmured he must have a scheme, a plan or a pattern or a grand glowing dream. The statesmen all whispered, there's something we've missed. No one's this random. There must be a twist. But something went snap. Something cracked with a pop. When ships could not sail and the tankers must stop, the strait filled with trouble, with buzzing in mines, with drones in the air and long tangled lines. The oil ticked up higher. The markets went tight. The Navy looked out for a perilous sight. For problems once planted and left in the sand don't vanish away with a wave of the hand. Yet still, from his perch in his tall, shiny hat, he shouted, "It's you! It's not me! Fancy that!" He threatened and blustered and rattled his bat, while never quite seeing how this led to that. For a cause has a cousin called consequence, see? They traveled together, 1, 2, and 3. But that twat in a hat with his brim pulled down flat just swatted at facts and imagined they'd scat. Oh, the twat in the hat, what a curious chap, who leapt before looking and napped in the gap between what he did and what followed from that. Yes, that was the tale of the twat in the hat.
Very, very nice. I can see the clip I'm going to pull to show everyone how serious we are on our show. All right, so David has got to leave us in about 9 minutes. So before he does, I want to we can always go back to that, but I want to talk about the Manosphere, because at the end of the show last week, I talked about the fact that I just watched Inside the Manosphere with my son Lex, which was very enlightening. Just seeing something like that through the eyes of my teenage son and understanding the world that he exists in from a social media perspective compared to us. And I think all parents need to be a lot more in tune with what's going on. So adults tend to seek information. Our children tend to get pushed information. And that's the massive difference between us. And I think those children growing into adults will continue on the push front. But anyway, it also turns out the boomers are falling down the rabbit holes in bigger numbers than ever before. But it's created a conversation around the globe, and it's been a really, really interesting conversation to witness. When I share about it, I'm amazed by how many men talk to me. I've seen really good men, because the majority of men are good, by the way. It's about the numbers that are coming through are about 25% of boys are stuck in the Manosphere. So it's about 75% aren't. I think that's something we should be pointing out. But it's forcing guys to be speaking up about what it means to be a good role model for young men. And it's been really nice to see that. Some of the guys in Theroux's documentary have kind of basically disappeared off social media. But it's we never address the problem at the core. And there's some data coming out that Gen Z boys, so my boys are both Gen Z, are more misogynistic than boomers, right? So we have a problem with young men, and it needs to be addressed. But I wanted to ask David just to give his point of view on what his takeaways are, because then he can jump off when he needs to. So David?
Yeah, I watched yesterday. I think that there were kind of three things that got me. One was that I spent 30 years working in the financial world, and a lot of it is very similar. In that way of kind of young men going there, making loads of money, and having the sort of lifestyle or stance that they would have, driving Lamborghinis or whatever it is that they have, the flaming Ferraris, in that way. And so in that way, it's just a transposition in that sense. And I think it's worth bearing that in mind, because a lot of it is that money. And a lot of what happens is that you get caught within there, where you have to keep paddling, you have to keep that hamster wheel turning along in order to sustain this. And so it all drives itself in that way. And that's been repeated a lot of times along in there. You end up within a setting in that way. What that also does is it brings on to the second part, which is, I call this line, stay in your lane. I think the one of the people, his wife, was talking about how to stay in the lane. And the mother of one of the characters as well was effectively reflecting on that. I have my relationship with that. What he does elsewhere, this is what he does to make money. And it's very easy to do. And I've seen that amongst that financial world as well, where the husband is fantastic, makes lots of money, runs this department, trading desk, bank, whatever institution. And that allows them to have that financial driver for everybody to accept the benefit of staying in the lane. And that staying in the lane ultimately is the real force that kind of maintains all this along. Because the influences that you can have you're selling away that influence for you having the comfort, you having the ability to continue whatever it is. Your relationship with the person is fine. It is made at the cost of something else. That actually is, on a broader level, is the problem we have with our money. And we've mentioned that before. In that way, we stay in our lane. Our lane is well defined. It makes us do that. And the last part, I think, is really important. They mentioned about value. They mentioned about how, as a man, you don't have value. As a woman, you do. And it took a little while to get that. And it's this aspect of saying, look, if you go into a bar and two girls can go into a bar and someone will buy them a drink as a way to, chat them up, introduce, try to start a conversation, like a drink, get your drink. And that's the value. Is the fact that no one's going to come up to another guy and says, would you like a drink? Can I get you a drink in that way? So hidden within that, of course, why they buy them that drink is that sexuality, is that aspect of saying, I'm trying to, pick someone up or whatever it is in that way. So there's a transaction that goes on in there. But what it does is this aspect where the value they talk about is an external value. It is the value exhibited in what you can then demonstrate to counter that. And very often when we talk about value, the value of individual, the value of a person, when we talk to, what Andrea often talks about, the value for his boys and so on, those are internal values. And there is that confusion and that aspect of, the role model, or whatever you may want to call it, is perhaps not even just a role model, it's the aspect of saying we have intrinsically a value, we are important. And that's where faiths and those aspects are important. I think of, so I'm Catholic, so I have that tradition and that heritage, and I think of the readings from there in that way, where there's one that says, even the hairs, the number of hairs on your head are counted. Doesn't matter who you are valuable, you are known. And that's the part. The problem we face is that people do not feel that they are seen, that they're known. So they have to make themselves to be seen, to be known. So a lot of those behavior comes out from there. And how you're then seen, how you're then known, goes into how do you market yourself. And of course, all the money then comes in. The best way to market something is to market sex, sexuality, and those sort of things. And that's what they do. And then everybody stays in their lane, so they have their OnlyFans women go and join them because they want the profile, not that they like them or anything, but they want that profile pickup along with it, which is again driven by their own kind of desire to be or need to be able to make their living in that sense. Anyway, that's
no, it's good. It's good. I found the whole bankers thing really interesting because when I worked in London, I came across those guys, and they're obviously not my cup of tea. The idea of the buying a girl a drink, I think in the last sort of couple of decades, that's become a little bit more fraught with danger, with the whole putting drugs into it. So what I hear yourself, to me, one of the things I've always raised my boys in with is the first thing you have to do is respect yourself. If you have no self-respect, you're incapable of respecting anybody else or anything. So I've always really talked to the boys about that sort of essence of self-respect, which I think could sit in a spiritual context as well, like you were talking about, David. I think the female side of the story that was revealed inside the Manosphere was equally interesting, which deserves its own, the whole OnlyFans thing. Phuket was full of OnlyFans girls. There was these hotels near us that was just every room was an OnlyFans girl doing whatever she was doing. And so as a female, I have you should be able to do whatever you want to do. It's your body, it's your choice, right? That's my belief. But I have a discomfort with that OnlyFans, what they're doing, because the people who are on the other end of it and how they're responding to it and how they think of all females as a result of it is something that if I had a daughter, I'd be incredibly concerned about that, right? So I'm glad I don't in this day and age. So yeah, so it's there's a lot of dimensions to it. All right, but Richard or Joe? And David, I know you need to go, so just whenever
Yeah,
you're ready.
so I'm gonna go. So just to say thank you and goodbye and have a great week, and don't let it all get you down. Kind of like it's sun shining. Go and breathe slowly, deeply, and enjoy.
Slowly and deeply. Yeah.
All right, Joe, Richard, who's going in?
Well, I first of all, I was struck momentarily by slowly and deeply and how it might be an OnlyFans channel of its own. But anyway,
it's not working. So I'm gonna go.
I was thinking about. So when I was looking at the Manosphere, I finally watched it, right? And I had a different kind of reaction to what you had. I think it was I just thought it's really very light. It's not really going deep at all. I found what he was trying to do is to Theroux, I think was sort of doing what he was doing anyway, which is to do something and find some humor in it as well. There was something disquietingly humorous about what was going on as well. But what I find myself doing though when I think about the Manosphere and what those who are accused of being part of it is, I think sometimes we don't see the point that they make as being in any way valid, right? I don't accept all of it, but I do see some of the things that they say as being true, right? And as I was watching it, and this is I must confess, look, it's a wound that's perhaps 35 years, 40 years in the making, right? When I was growing up, the girls always said they wanted the guy who would make them laugh, who could make them do whatever, they had all these good values, which you thought, okay, that's how you be a good guy. And yet they didn't behave in that way, right? They ended up with the jock. They ended up with the rich boy. They did all those things as well. And so when I think about what it's like right now to grow up and to be in this environment where we're hyper competitive and we're all trying to find our place. I mean, you must remember that everyone is trying to find their value in the world as well. And they're getting all these ticks, they're getting all these kinds of reactions, and part of it is expressed in terms of likes, part of it is expressed in terms of the following, the other part of it is the money, right? What produces money? The economy tells you are worth something, and there is a part of the economy that does that, right? So if we don't acknowledge that for men, not just boys, for men, life is actually becoming more complex, more challenging, and that there is a kind of a thing going on where guys sort of would need to gather for a kind of support, right? And I know this is it's not kumbaya, it's not an Oprah Winfrey kind of a show, but there is the locker room. And I speak as someone who feels very uncomfortable about being in those situations. I don't like being in that role, but I recognize as well that there is kind of a like for all the talk of safe spaces. I think men also, there's certain groups of men who need that kind of safe space as well. They want to say the thing that is on their mind, that is literally, if they're being vulnerable about themselves, they're finding someone really hot and they'd like to do something, right? And that is also another aspect of vulnerability which is not welcome. You can't speak of that without being labeled a creep or being weird, so that there is that mix, that balance, and so I can understand why the Manosphere presents itself as a kind of a warm embrace. And to be fair as well, there is a spectrum, right? We tend to mark the whole group with the worst end of it, when I think there is something to be said about the Manosphere, because I think it's only mentioned in passing in the documentary, if you watch it on Netflix, where it is a combination of comedians and podcasters and a number of people that support that space, not as extremely as the ones that we saw on the documentary, but there is a Manosphere, and I mean, like, for me, I would have to say, in some ways, I might be part of it. I'm definitely in the space when I talk about Jordan Peterson, and I think he makes sense. And I get looks from people around me who go like, that's just, no, I can't, I just can't. And I go, well, hang on, you've got to discuss this stuff. There's something happening. It may not be absolutely the truth, but there is something to it, right? Just like everything else in the world, there is something to, if a group feels uncomfortable, if they feel displaced, there is something there. There is smoke, and maybe we should spend some time sometimes trying to figure out what the fire is. And one of the things that I was talking to a researcher about some time ago was this thing about that duality that we have, right? We have this outward facing thing. We want to be the best version of ourselves to everyone. So as much as we criticize Facebook or Instagram because we're trying to portray ourselves as the best that there is, that's also what we do in society. So, we are the kinds of people who would occasionally, and I'll say it speaking for myself, maybe break the rules in traffic, maybe, do something illegal, right? Technically illegal when no one's watching, but we don't want to be seen like that by other people, and there's a real need for that. So, yeah. So that's my take on the manosphere. So I wasn't completely joking when I put on David's post that you could hear more of that from me, because I do feel there is a discussion, there's a push in the tide that doesn't support the ability for somebody else to kind of go against the tide. Not that they want to go against the tide. Maybe they just are where they are, but the water's washing this way and they're getting swept away as well.
Mm. Can I just respond to what you've said? Because I think what you've said is really important. Okay. I totally agree with you. So Jordan Peterson helped my brother through a pretty tough time. But there's women in my community, and if they're listening now, they'll be angry with me. When he talks about climate change, I want to punch him in the face. But when he helps my brother, I'm like, good on you, mate. Like, if you're, because he's a fake expert when it comes to climate, but he's not a fake expert when it comes to that. He could do with a bit of work on his delivery, but he helps people. So I don't completely block him out. He's not for me, but he never was meant to be for me. When we talk about the manosphere, I think Trump is the ultimate manosphere influencer that has ever existed, right? So when you talk about the grift of selling off the back of it, he's the first influencer president, or maybe Ronald Reagan was. But he is basically an influencer. That's how he started this whole, and his grift is bigger than anyone we've ever seen. And he's a classic example of disrespecting women, although he's surrounded by women in leadership positions. Not necessarily the greatest women that I admire, but there always needs a place for men to be men, and I totally agree with that. And I think those places still exist. What's happened is the digital world. So that's the other bigger thing that's sort of come into the mix, right? The digital world has, so there's too many men and the pandemic sort of accelerated this. They're not out in community. They're not part of something. So my boys, from their young teens, we always made sure that they had influence with other men, whether it was with fighting or fitness or tennis or whatever, because we knew it was important for them to be exposed to other males and their ideas so that they could work out who they are, because it's not just a dad's responsibility. And then, of course, you've got a lot of boys out there who don't have a dad, right? But so when you look at what do we need to do? So I've been talking about this for a long time, and people will always say to me, "What can I do?" Well, if you're a man, set up a community where you help young men and teach them to do something that you're good at. So it could be sport. That's an obvious place to start. Fitness. It could be how to repair things. It could be how do you manage your money. It could be any of those things, but doing it without any motivation other than giving young men role models, and all over the world we should be starting this. So one of the I'm going to share another piece, but one of the articles that I'm going to put in the weekend reads, the first thing they do is talk about community, and we all need that, right? So third spaces for young men, critical, face-to-face, clubs. And, in places like the UK, they've been closing those clubs down left, right, and centre. That's an absolute tragedy. Boys need to know that it's okay to be vulnerable. So, but in their own way, not like females are vulnerable. And then the other thing is, just healthy identity connection. And if we've got a young man who's been tainted by the manosphere in our life, we don't have to be ourselves to them. We don't have to put them down. We need to embrace them and show them, like, if you're a female and there's someone in the manosphere in your life and they're disparaging you, the guys that get out of the incel movement, they get out because the women in their life are nice to them. And so it starts to jar, the belief starts to jar. But yeah, and the other thing is fund and amplify credible male creators. And this is a big problem we've talked about before. The vast majority of the funding goes to these extreme groups who are dividing society. And the people who are out there doing a good job and being kind, and there's these guys all over YouTube, and it's like they're replacing dads, and for kids who don't have a dad, and it's like, how do you do a tie? There's a lot of young men who need role models, and I think it's up to men to stand up and start saying, well, a world where half the population is hated by the other part of the population is not going to be a positive world to live in. And even if it's only 25% of men who are misogynistic, that's not a positive thing. So if we want to build a better world, we've all got to take responsibility for building this better world. And if your part is being a ambassador, which is what I call them, where you go out there and you take on a role, whatever it is, give your Saturday mornings up and recruit the boys in your neighborhood and say, come on, guys, let's go fishing. I'll teach you how to ride a bike. I'll teach you how to chop wood, whatever, but that's what we need. We just need more responsibility. And it's like nobody wants to take responsibility for anything anymore. And David was saying everyone's sitting there waiting for governments to solve all our problems. We've got to start solving our problems. And this, to me, is an obvious place to start. Let's help the young men. You guys get on with that. And us women, we need to sort out the young girls, because there's a problem there too. And we need to fix that. So that's just what I kind of want to add to what you said. Richard?
No, I kind of agree with what you said before, because having one of each, I would probably concur that the biggest driver is just the general lack of respect that you have. And that's not really how I was brought up. And certainly none of my friends that I grew up with viewed it that way. And, if you ultimately want to be successful with women as a man, which I think most men want to be, the smart path is to be respectful and funny. And, having some money in your pocket probably helps as well. But ultimately, the respect part is really the one thing that does get you somewhere, I guess. And today's generation, I think, has lost that to some degree, and whether that is a lack of suitable male role models, etc., it's probably a very large part of it. But you need to bring back the respect. It's like having a debate. You can strongly disagree, and God knows I disagree with most people most of the time, but I can still respect their views and let their voices be heard. And then I will try to, break down their arguments and make my view come across. And it's no different there in growing up as a man. It's like, for God's sake, you have to have respect for the other. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful. Trust me.
Yeah, it's not good for any of us, right? So I'm just going to share this article here. I don't know where this goes to, but it's called "The Academic Justification for Male Supremacy," which is in New Lines magazine. I don't know if you guys had a chance to read it. It's a pretty long one, but we were talking about the backlash earlier. So the Me Too backlash is actually being tied back to Epstein, interestingly, and this academic justification for male supremacy is also centered around Epstein and what he did within academic institutions, which was very much obviously focused on males, not female academics, and it sort of moved into basically biologizing inequality. So so what's going on? In some ways, I kind of look at these the examples shown in the Manosphere, inside the Manosphere, is like where we were already going. The grifters, everyone's out there. So people always tell me I should sell things off the back of what I'm doing, or I've had a buy me a coffee on my blog, I think, for 4 years. No one's ever bought me a coffee, not one. Steve told me he'd bought me a coffee once. I never saw any money going into the account. So, but I, from an integrity perspective, it doesn't feel right. But if they're selling you something that basically, so if they're sharing, so the anti-vax movement, right? And when they finish their spiel, they are willing to sell you something like, I was going to say hormones, vitamins, or ivermectin, or one of those sort of things. So their message benefits the sale. So that's the question. Just to encourage people to just be like, I don't mind people selling things, but if they're selling things to get a sale, then you've got to question the sale. There's a lot of people who are not selling anything, and people like us, we're just here because we want to do good in the world. But we don't get the numbers. We don't have the money behind us. We don't have that, right? So that's a problem. So there needs to be more funding for people who are out there speaking up. But also, I don't think we understand those sort of grifters, that sort of mindset, people who would do anything to make a buck. Like, I don't think people understand that mindset, because I'm not one. You guys aren't one, right, Joe?
Well, I would say I understand it, but it's one of those things where I've along the way made some decisions in terms of what I do and what I would cross, what lines I would cross, right? I mean, I was just telling my wife about the younger, sillier me as I look upon them now, saying that I didn't want to participate in the recovery after 9/11. All indications are that when something like that happens, if you jump back in, the market recovers within 90 days. That's something that's almost it's just almost automatic in the way human beings behave, especially when there's a natural upside. And I, as a younger person, decided that I didn't want to participate in that. I felt morally that it wasn't something that was right to do. And I don't think it's how a lot of people might look at things. I mean, and again, if we look at these people, we might call them the grifters. It's not everyone is a grifter. There's a bunch of people out there who are doing things for influence, and perhaps I've seen so many stories with them as well. People who just have not made any money at all. They've been doing some stuff. They've got the numbers, and they're not actually converting it as well. And then someone teaches them the idea of business, where there is some kind of a way to monetize it and do it. And those people who've been skillful and better at it have perhaps been able to align themselves so that they offer a product which still adds value to other people, and therefore can attract some, allows them to extract some value from the world. But for a lot of other people, it's like, okay, let's try and find something that's sellable. You've got all this influence. I mean, the big currency right now is influence, attention, right? So, we were talking last week about why is there all this news now and misinformation. I think in the notes for this week, we're talking about that as well. It has become this thing where influencers who normally were telling you about makeup and baggage and all this kind of stuff discover that the new trend, the new fashion is now to speak about the war and stuff like that. And then they dig in, because if you're doing it right, and I've done the study to understand what doing it right looks like, is what you do is you get onto TikTok, or you get onto Instagram as a creator, and you look at what they tell you is the trend, and you identify that the trend is going in this direction, and therefore you will follow a trend to create stuff. And then after this, when you're following a trend, what you have to do is to be different within the trend. And the only way you're going to be different within the trend, especially when it's a global news like a war, is to add your own distinct flavor or twist on something. And so as you're doing the thing that is right for the medium, as in like to get attention on this particular thing, what you're going to do is invariably you have to create or do something which is outside of reality. And you end up with something interesting, a take that no one's had, because the only way you could do that is to create some kind of a difference or gap between reality and what you've talked about. And people can get in and get in there and go like, oh man, didn't hear that before, we've got to share this. So that's kind of where we are right now in the world. We're chasing attention. That's the big holy grail that everyone wants. The next step, of course, is how do you monetize that? And some people have that combination laid out. And they're going to be very successful. They're seriously, there are lots of people I've seen online who've done. I mean, you don't have to dig the bottom of the barrel. You can just do something slightly distasteful and be consistent at it and keep doing it again, and again. And the audience, enough of the audience, supports you, and that's going to make someone a living somewhere, and they'll keep on doing that. So I do feel conflicted about this, because on one hand, they're actually employing a kind of skill. They're actually doing something right. Unfortunately, it is making a living perhaps in a neighborhood that we don't perhaps like or see much respect in it. Yeah, so that's for me how I see these people. I can see, I mean, there's a spectrum. Obviously, you can see someone who's just completely without morals, completely just there to exploit, anything and everyone that they can. But there are those who at least try to align their brand, align their message. I think there is hope yet for the influencers.
All right. Yeah.
I think all of us have a little bit of a grifter inside us, whether it's a large influence or a small influence. It's still an influence in how we decide to go about making money, and it's part of us all. But speaking for myself and most of the people I know, the vast majority of the people I know, they're still dictated by some form of moral compass.
Yeah.
If I was given a commission to go and sell landmines, in Africa, I wouldn't do it, irrespective of, the money that was being offered. And then you have shades of gray, of course. But I think that most people, the vast majority, are dictated by some form of moral compass that actually ensures you trying to stay on the side of doing the right thing, because, and I think this is important as you grow older, and being older than the two of you, I think you will find in the coming years that it becomes increasingly important to you as your age that you want to come down on the right side of history with regard to the decisions you made about things.
I don't think I don't think the age between us is as big as you think. I think it's probably only a couple of years, Richard, because you're not a boomer. And there has been some recent research that is basically showing worldwide there is basically a collapse in morality.
Yes.
And people, who are, so one of the things I love about going to Australia is you just have these random interactions on the street, and it's people being kind to each other. And every time I go to Australia, it's just like, oh, that's so nice, Now, in Australia, that people might think it's not as kind as it used to be. But for me, living away from Australia for such a long time, I really notice it, and I'd be sad to see it going. But it's a big issue, right? But if we're going to overcome the biggest issues that we face, we need to be looking at all of this stuff, because at the core of it, if humanity doesn't heal and come back together and have respect for each other, because everyone, I always say everyone wins with equality. Everything is better when we have truly equal societies. Men's lives are better and women's lives are better.
Sure.
And also from a minorities perspective, and obviously our Indigenous brothers and sisters, right? When everybody has a voice at the table, everyone rises together. But if it's only one small group dominating what we get, that's not good for everybody else, right? And their life is worse. So it's in everybody's interest to turn this around. You know, we're still in the war on woke, and this is one of the outcomes of it. So and this war is one of the outcomes of it. You know, if you think about the really big, ugly, negative things that are happening, this is all part of the outcome that we're going through right now. So this is the path on offer if we continue the way we're going, or we change directions and we say, come on, this isn't where we want to go. It's not making us happy anyway. So, you know, so I think if we can all sort of really sort of step back and rather than sit in fear right now of where we're going, see the lesson that we're being taught and the path that we're being offered. So we were talking about it last week. Who do we want to be as we go through this time? So what's our role? Everyone's got a role. And a lot of people are sitting there. When you're in fear and despair, you basically, you can't move, right? So what the world is saying to you right now, what is the role that you're going to take on and when are you going to get started? Everyone, every single person can answer that call. Yep. That's what we need.
Well, yeah, everyone should be able to answer that call. I fully agree. Yeah.
In a big way or a small way?
In your way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, in whatever is your way, you should answer that call. Yes.
I'll put us back up because I figure we can do this now. Yeah, exactly. Joe?
Well, I was thinking about this in terms of what you need in terms of radical leadership, right? I mean, if you think about the major turns that we've had in the past, and we you know, to always just say that we are here, it's terrible, we have to make a change. It is actually the nature of the market. We really have to get to the point where we go like, okay, you know, it's too much. This is you have the overcorrection. And then the market begins to move into where it inherently wants to go. So if you look at money markets in general, they have a tendency to want to move up, and I think that humanity has the same sort of thing as well. We do want to become better. That's the thing we end up wanting to do. But we go through these corrections along the way. We had the world wars, you know, and it's those situations where, you know, things get so bad, you get this radical decision to go like, okay, this is now so bad, we're going to do something completely different, right? We used to do war a certain way. We used to win war and celebrate victories a certain way. And I think World War II is where we changed the way it worked. And America took a leadership role. There was more wisdom applied to the way the victors were going to divide the spoils. Yeah. And it wasn't omniscient wisdom, obviously, because the longer game came into play. For all the good things that came out of World War II and the way the world works, we also have the Middle East, which is, you know, also a result of all that. So not perfect. Things are moving along. You know, I think about Nelson Mandela, thinking about what do you do after you overthrow the social structure that is apartheid, and you go like, okay, now what do we do? Oh, obviously we punish those who were wrong, but instead the radical move is to go reconciliation. Let's work on that.
Yeah.
And it takes that sort of large thing that's so bad that we have to change. I mean, you know, like on the LinkedIn post, David's post was, imagine the world if it was ruled by women, or if women were in charge, right? And I'm not really saying it completely as a joke, but I do believe women are in charge. It's just that you have had too much patience with what's going on. And I think what happens in the end is the women go like, nope, this is not going to happen anymore. And we all, you get together and you go like, okay, playtime's over. Everybody out of the pool. And I think the market needs. I think of the world as an organism like that. It's a large organism. It's a polyorganism that needs to find its balance, and it has to overcorrect for it to go like, no, this is ridiculous. This is too much. This is, you know, and then it says no, never again. So we're gonna go. I think we're gonna go through that. I hope we're gonna go through that. Unfortunately, what it means is that we have to go through another kind of world war. Hopefully, it's not violent kind. I mean, there is that part of it, and we can feel a tendency towards it. But I think we're all going to face a different common enemy, and I'm hoping that we face this third common enemy in such a way that is not too devastating to the entire population, right? I mean, I feel badly about it because I kind of expect it will be the less well prepared, the less the less capable who are going to pay the price for it.
Always.
But we do need to. I think it needs to get there. And I've always said this about most things. I say, someone has to die before a change happens, and sometimes it's going to be something really, really big. It has to be something really, really big. And I don't know. We seem to have an appetite for big. We're going like, no, that's not big enough.
Yeah.
Let's see what else you got.
And the difference between now and before is the climate, right? And so we've got a super El Nino. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up the last few discussion points on the horizon. So basically, by the end of this year, it's going to be very much entrenched. So this year might not come out as the hottest year in 125,000 years, which we had in obviously 2024, but next year will definitely come out as the hottest year. And the only reason this year won't come out as the hottest year is because we had a couple of months of cooling at the beginning of the year. But if it does become the hottest year, then it's going to be catastrophic. Yes. You know what I mean? So a super El Nino, the percentage chances that they're giving it are pretty high. It's been really, really hot here. Joe, I'm sure you've noticed how hot it is. When they talk about war and boots on the ground and all that sort of stuff, it's like, I'm worried about any soldier going into an environment like that who won't be prepared. But I'm also worried about all of the people across the global south whose gas supplies are now basically there's nobody topping it up, and being able to keep cool. Is being impacted by this, so that's really good. There's been these freaky heat coming through the US across the west. Now, first of all, it's going to melt any snow melt that is already up there. But when heat hits for the first time in a season, people's bodies aren't prepared, so there's more deaths. Last night, in some ways, it's good news because it only went across the very, very. If you look at Australia, there's a point at the very top. So it was 5 kilometres shy of a Category 5. So it went across. It's been downgraded to a 3. It's heading into the Northern Territory. But that, that's a big one. The world's mega leaks of methane have been revealed. So in Turkmenistan, they're number 1. They are releasing 18 tonnes an hour. The United States is number 2. They're releasing 5.5 tons an hour. And then you've got Venezuela, they've got 5 megaleaks, and Iran, they've got 3 megaleaks. And I'm sure Iran's got a few more megaleaks now. But these so methane is 80 times more potent than CO2, but over the short frame. It's considered the easiest thing we can do. Yes. Is to tap these leaks, the easiest thing we can do.
Exactly. So take the easy wins when you can. That's always been a winning strategy, right?
Yeah. If we don't want to.
The problem is the people who are overseeing the methane, or at least the production that's causing methane leaks, the least incentivized to do something about it, because their calculus is completely different for everybody else. I mean, like I think the article basically says, like, it's as far as business is concerned, the loss of methane is not it doesn't justify the maintenance that's required to go and fix the problem. It's not it's just from a pure economics perspective. So it's one of those things. It's unfortunate about the situation right now. And actually, for me, one of the things that I think is we're sometimes maybe not considering is like, because of all the stuff that's happening, the biggest threat to humanity right now in terms of everything is actually the war, because it everything else that we talk about right now, the climate, how it's moving and it's creeping along, the war is snapping some stuff into place, which is going to cause some really quick harm relative to the big picture, right? So like I said earlier, the fuse has been lit. It's not a case of stuff isn't going to happen. The fuse has been lit. There isn't the capacity to replace the stuff that is not in the supply chain right now, which is going to be a significant part of what's going to happen in a few in a few months. I mean, it'll be a year when the worst of it kind of hits, but our eyes not on the ball. We don't have control of it. And it's one of those things we have to kind of get an idea that, okay, the fuse has been lit. Now, what are we going to do about this? If we keep doing this, if we don't fix other problems, if it gets worse, there's going to be that first fuse isn't going to stop being lit. It's going to explode in a way. It's going to have the impact that it has. And are we going to complicate things by having other things kind of going on top of that? Exactly. So as much as climate is a global crisis right now, the war and its out and the repercussions from the activities within that are actually having worse repercussions. They're going to influence more people and put people.
They're having worse implications because of the climate. So it's not. It's
a complication. It's a complication on top of the climate. Right. But it's like it's like the weather is really dry, and someone says, "Here, some fire," and that's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the gas. But Richard, I know you need to go. You're with your mum in Sweden.
Yep.
And a special time, and it looks like the sun's just come up.
It's coming through.
But
it's strong and it's warm.
Yeah, nice. So we'll let you go, and you'll be in the UK when we see you again next week.
I'll be back as usual next week. Make no worries about that.
We've got Nick joining us next week, so we're going to be talking about mental health, which I think will be a timely conversation considering what everyone's going through. All right, Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, guys. See you next week. Have a good weekend. See you later. Bye.
Bye. I've put information integrity in the mix for a couple of weeks now. We never really get time to talk about it. We won't do it now. But there's a piece called Screen Scandal: How Ofcom Lets GB News Get Away with It. And basically the joke is GB News should be called Reform TV, and it's against UK policy law that broadcasters have to do certain things. Anyway, the guy who's led this, so The New World is a media publication I wasn't aware of until this came out, so I'm going to subscribe to them. But Alan Rushbridger, have you come across him before?
I don't know the names. I must apologize.
No, it's all right. He's when the whole BBC thing came out last year, he was the name that everyone kept putting into the ring for the person who should oversee the reforms that need to happen at the BBC. He's got a podcast called Media Confidential, which it's on my listen to every now and again. So he's the guy that led it, and he got a whole bunch of journalists from right across the spectrum of media in the UK and set them all a bunch of tests. And Ofcom, who is the organisation that legislates this stuff.
They're supposed to be the media watchdog in the UK.
Yeah, basically, yeah. But it's for broadcast media, right? Not for... Yeah. I don't understand it. But the thing, they're just not doing their job, right? And one of the comments is, I don't think they're across the issues. I think they're too big and bureaucratic. I don't think they understand the world that they're in now. I thought that was really good, but that'll be in the weekend reads. I really recommend reading it. We're seeing Brendan Carr threatening press in the US that they won't have their licenses reviewed if they don't have do wall coverage in the way that they like. There's a lot of stuff going on from an information perspective. We're seeing a lot more attacks in Gaza. We're seeing more than 700,000 people are on the move in Lebanon. Over 1,000 people have been killed. Pakistan and Afghanistan. Over 100 people were killed in a drug rehab center. Everyone's saying it's not me, but yeah, it's pretty tough, right? Pretty bleak times. But what's keeping you distracted?
I mean, I was having a look at my stuff, and I realized, well, first of all, I'm watching The Mentalist, rewatching The Mentalist again, but not in super detail, because I'd seen the whole show once before, but I realized that I kind of forgotten. So it's my soap opera that's playing alongside everything I'm doing right now as I do my work, right? So I guess I'm happily distracted that way. I spend a lot of time doing podcasts and listening to podcasts. Actually, this one particular series. I'm not very fond of like a main so-called mainstream podcasts channels, but one particular one that's come out, the iHeart family, is Mind Games, and it's as good as you can expect one of these it's sort of popcorn documentaries to go. Mind Games. It talks about NLP, mind control, hypnosis,
Cool.
Richard Bandler, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little that it's very classic American. Two friends kind of have an interest in something, and so they go out and do something, and they happen to be journalists, and so there's a little bit of journalistic stuff to that. But it still talks about mind control and NLP and stuff like that. So I found that to be quite interesting. And what I have on my regular list is I have most of the late night comedy shows sort of on my regular rotation. And I don't know whether you've ever heard this particular one called No Such Thing as a Fish.
No, I think you've mentioned it before.
Yeah, it's the producer of a show called QI. So QI in the UK is one of it's a game show it's a panel show that has been as with many things, institutional things in the UK, inexplicably unsayably so as well. Inexplicably, I can't say that. Okay, you know what I'm saying.
I've had a few of them today.
Successful, because they just talk about things that are interesting and quirky and stuff like that. It's all about knowledge. At one point, hosted by Stephen Fry, and now I can't remember her name as well. But anyway, so it's just the producers of this show talking about facts, talking about the interesting facts that come across their desk, the most interesting facts that they come across. So it's an entertaining talk. They're quite witty. I think they are one of the leading podcasts in the UK, and they're a good listen to. So it's No Such Thing as a Fish. And what I like about what they do, and one of the things that they acknowledge, is that their facts tend to decay, as in, like, as they're talking about stuff that they know to be true today, they know that facts actually decay over time. Yeah. So what you believe right now, there's a good chance 20% of facts become non-facts after some time, as we get to know more about life.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I've had that conversation with people who talk to me about history, and I'm like, that has been disproved. And they're like, how can history be disproved? I'm like, there's a lot of ways history because first of all, it's a perspective, but certainly if there's archaeological evidence, there's new things are found. There's so many ways, and it's interpretation, and it's the amount of bias that exists in the scientific community from the archaeologists and sociologists. As the ice is melting, they're finding things which are changing history. In the Americas, they're uncovering these temples that defy everything they've ever believed, right? So yeah, I'm a big believer in always checking on your facts, especially if they're old, because it's and in war, like I think I might have talked about it when we were in Vietnam. Went to the War Museum, and you heard the war through the Vietnamese eyes in that museum, right? Which is completely different story to what we see in Hollywood. And one thing I've got to say, the Vietnamese were very respectful towards the enemy. in the way they present this information, which I was surprised by. They weren't arrogant; they were respectful, and it was incredible. But I need to do on my Uncommon Courage page. I want to do a show us your podcast, and just get people to share what they're watching, what they're listening to, because there's a lot of really good ones out there. But if you're listening to podcasts and the person isn't famous, I try not to support famous people on their podcasts because they're already famous. I try to find people who need support, who need people listening to them, who need, I've had to ask some people to like and comment on my podcast, because until you get that, you just don't get any traction. And it's really hard to get that. But my friends will recommend podcasts to me of famous people, but they'll never listen to me. And you're like, oh, thanks, man. So it's kind of it's a funny old place to sit in, right?
Well, I've been there for a long time. I mean, I've had podcasts for the longest time. I've had people who will tell other people about how you should listen to Joe's podcast because it's really good, but they don't actually listen themselves. I mean, that's just one of those things as well, right?
Yeah,
so
it's weird, right?
There is so little time. I love podcasts. I have hundreds of unlistened to episodes. I mean, these are the people I would like to spend time with. These people I've actually chosen to listen to, and I still haven't got around to them. So I do understand.
It's a reading book,
ton of time,
right? Yeah. No, it's not. I totally get it. I can't do two things. It's like if I'm writing or reading, I can't listen. No. I can only listen when I'm, using my hands to do something. So it's I don't have that much time for it, but I enjoy it when I can. But yeah, so for me, it's I finished Bridgerton, and I have to say for this season, I was a bit disappointed. I felt like it needed 2 more episodes this year, just to explore a couple of storylines more. But we have also started Drive to Survive, and that's been interesting because we've watched it since the beginning, and it's really evolving. And I'm not necessarily like this year. There's more driving than there was last time.
Yeah.
I feel like the drama is more created. And they're just using the techniques that those sort of shows have been using for years. But I don't know. It doesn't feel as empathetic, I suppose. What was that? The Aussie guy that they started Drive to Survive with.
Weber.
No, not Weber. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Ricardo.
Yeah. When they started through with him, and then when he finished his final season, and they did a tribute to him because he was really the guy that got the show off the ground, right? I felt like the whole way they treated him was respectful, whereas this time, I'm not feeling that respect that they've had in the past. Which I don't know. Have you watched it?
I think I haven't watched the later seasons, but I can imagine what's happening, because what's happening with F1 itself is that it's become frenetic. Right? I mean, there's hardly any pause between races. It's a full schedule. It's all back to back to back to back. So you can imagine that everybody involved doesn't have that much time. So Drive to Survive has to try and figure out how to also at the same time conduct these interviews in between as they get access. So they don't get access to everybody. They're not covering all the teams. They only get some teams, and for the teams, it's strategic as well. So, it's and again, the third kind of thing outside of it is that it's also a Netflix thing, right? So they're trying to they've taken a show, a format that's been very successful, and riding the wave even further, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the natural drama in a racing show has to be usually is the racing. So there's a lot of that as well. So there's the build up of what's going to happen, and then of course there's the play out on the race as the race is going out. And there are these little moments that happen, like basically on track, which the marshals will just call a racing incident, but you can play it up and you can turn it into something more than it actually is for a professional driver. And that's the obligation for me as a storyteller. If I'm Netflix, my obligation is to make that bigger than it really was. Much like you hear the commentators as they're doing their thing live as the race is going on as well. They sometimes make a bigger thing out of something which the drivers have long forgotten about, and they moved on to the next thing. but they're
Yeah.
going through replays and talking about stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's done wonderful things, for the sport. It's
Yeah, it has.
definitely, expanded it. The US is fully on board. I think Cadillac has a team this year as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with all of that. It's been great for the sport. It's put it on the global stage. The US is nuts for it, right? I agree with all of that. I just feel the vibe, I suppose,
Yeah.
of the show this year doesn't feel. It's like Steve saying, yeah, not just Cadillac, it's Audi too. And then of course we had the Red Bull Christian Horner being sacked last year, which is being showed now. And there's a human element to that story, and there was always a bit of a bitchiness between the team principals. You kind of got that, but I don't know. It just feels like the America's Next Top Model. It got more and more extreme as
Right.
time went on, and I feel that this is the first year I'm feeling that shift with Drive to Survive, whereas before the story
Right.
was enough in its own right, and I didn't feel that it needed to go down that path. But maybe there's
Yeah.
new producers, new money behind it, and they're doing that American thing of inshitifying it. You've got to do this year.
Yeah.
It's got to get worse. It's got to be more dramatic. It's got to be this, and I just don't think. I think it's a sport where these are premier athletes at the top of their game. Like there's nobody like a Formula One driver from a athletic perspective. There's no one like an engineer that's working out how to make these cars go faster, right? I mean, every single person involved in these teams are world class at what they do, and that's why the show was amazing. Now they're turning it into a Desperate Housewives, and I don't know. I haven't talked to Steve about it. I'd be curious to know what he thinks, but I'm not enjoying it as much. But anyway, that's just my impression of it so far. So obviously I'll finish the season, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I haven't loved it enough from the last season to go in and want to start this new season. It's not been as
Okay.
interesting. To me, even the races themselves have been a little less interesting last year. But I will say one thing though. I mean, the latest F1 season is interesting because of all the new rules that they've brought into the
And the battery
from an engineering
technology.
perspective.
Yeah.
It's really changed the game, and it's now interesting to watch. There's a different sort of mix in terms of the drivers or the what do you call it, the teams that have supremacy. I don't know whether you've been following F1 at all, but it's become a bit more interesting to watch right now. The young'uns are having a field day. So last year we had Piastri and what's his name for McLaren, the two young drivers coming before, right? And this year as well, there's been a surprise in the last race.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Kimi Antonelli. See, I even know that name.
Yeah.
He's a little sweetie. But actually, I'm getting to know him from last year when he was just sort of starting out. Anyway, we should let everyone go in peace and wish you all a happy weekend. And obviously, we've talked about some pretty tough stuff today, but get focused locally. That's the best thing you can do.
I don't know how many of our viewers, listeners, celebrating Hari Raya, but have a great weekend.
Celebrate
great
Hari
time with
Raya.
the family.
Yeah, we celebrate them all out here. It's public holiday for us. All right.
Yep.
We will see you next week, and we're going to bring on someone who's a great guy, and he's going to talk about mental health. So we might be able to give you some tips on how to cope with these tough times. All right. Cheers.
Okay. All right.
Bye.